welcome to episode 5 of Mark on Comms. My name's Mark Mills. I'm the lead commentator for FIBA's Euroleague Women, and this is a series giving you some looks into my thoughts on this year's competition. Today, this is our Week 3 preview. So in that, I'm going to go through some of the latest news around Euroleague Women's basketball. Alongside that, I'm going to jump in and give you a look at the games coming up, give you my thoughts, the 3 games that I think are the ones to watch this week. Either on DAZN or on FIBA's official YouTube channel, and then I will jump in and give you my predictions. I will pick which 8 teams I think are going to come out of game day 3 with the win. Okay, straight into the latest news around Euroleague Women. The first being that only 3 teams are left with a perfect record after game day 2. That's Mersin, Fenerbahce and Raya. They all have perfect 2-0 records. You'd probably say Mersin and Fenerbahce, 2 of last year's Final Four teams. We expected that, particularly how they'd recruited in the off-season. They have gone all in to come away with the title this year. So we expect them to be big hitters in their groups. The one that might be a little bit more surprising is Umana Raya. Absolutely some good recruitment, some smart recruitment, a perfectly balanced roster, young and old, ready to go, and 2 games in and they already have 2 wins to their names. They are the surprise package, but the pleasant surprise package that we've had so far here in Euroleague Women's. Second piece of latest news to look at is the fact that DVTK, Avenida, Borj, Polkowice and Praha all bounced back after game day 1, and that's why you love Euroleague Women. 5 teams who lost in game day 1 have won in game day 2. It's such a competitive season this year. So many teams are going to take wins off each other, and because of the new format, it makes it even more exciting because there's no time to bed in. There's no time to have a couple of games of feelers and find your feet in the competition. You have to get wins and you have to get them early. Seeing those teams bounce back just show you how important these early games are, how hard they're all fighting for these early wins. Great to see so many games so close. And as I said in episode 4, we obviously have group where every team has the same record. 1 win, 1 loss after game day 2. That sets us up for an exciting game day 3 onwards here in the first round this year. Final piece of latest news to take you through. Hot off the press early in the hours here in Europe, the New York Liberty were crowned with their first ever WNBA title. Fittingly, Game 5 of the 5-game series went all the way to overtime, them coming away with a 5-point win. Both rosters absolutely stuffed with Euroleague Women talent. Obviously, the headline, the big name is Brianna Stewart, coming away with her first title for her New York team. But grabbing more of the headlines, maybe former Euroleague Women's player Jonquel Jones coming away with the Finals MVP award as well. Emotional moments, amazing to see so many great Euroleague Women's players picking up the silverware there in that WNBA championship game. On the losing side, obviously, plenty of Euroleague Women's players as well, in particular Collier. I think if they'd won the game, she was an absolute shoo-in for the Finals MVP. But exciting to see plenty of Euroleague Women's players doing it outside of the competition and coming away with the title in the WNBA. Okay, so let's jump into the 8 games ahead of us here this week. Like last week, we've got 5 on Wednesday, 3 on Thursday. I'm going to go through the full slate, then I'll jump into my 3 games that are ones to watch. First up, Olympiacos, obviously struggling at the moment, going up against the powerful Mersin. That's certainly going to be an interesting one, near must-win game for Olympiacos, and a tough time to face Mersin for them. Second up, Polkowice taking on Fenerbahce. Again, the Turkish team looking strong, the reigning champions, heading to Poland to take on Polkowice. Then we have Skio, who looked strong game day 1. Had a bit of a bump in the road, game day 2 on the road to DVTK. They now face bottom of the table Lond in that game. So that's going to be an interesting one. Lond want to get back to winning ways. They won on game day 1. They lost heavily in game day 2. How do they correct here in game day 3? Third up, Villeneuve Dask against Zaragoza. Again, Villeneuve Dask, a bit like Olympiacos, certainly had a tough start to their Euroleague Women's campaign. And Zaragoza, one of those teams at that mid-tier team at the moment, not quite, I don't think, shown us what they can fully deliver on the hardwood. How will they turn up on the road in France? This week, Villeneuve Dask really do need to fight for a win and get one on the board pretty soon. Final game of Wednesday is Valencia against Győr. Valencia, obviously one of the hot prospects coming in the off-season. Huge recruitment, brought together an all-star lineup, an all-star roster to take on this year's competition. They're going up against Győr. Haven't had it all their own way, Valencia, so they'll want to make sure that they make their home court a fortress and pick up the win there against Győr. Győr, again, another team that on their day can challenge pretty much any team in this competition, but they're not necessarily the most consistent of teams. Again, we look to see how they step up this Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we have 3 games for you, and I'm going to jump into a little bit more detail for each of these 3 games, as weirdly, my 3 games to watch are those 3 games on Thursday. Okay, the first one to watch for me is DVTK on their home floor taking on Avenida. DVTK, a 7-point win over Skier. A bit of an upset win, I would say, last week. Certainly one I didn't predict. It moves them to a 1-1 record, and it highlights again for me maybe how important the home floor is for DVTK. The arena atmosphere last week in that DVTK arena was phenomenal, and it certainly spurred them on. They were down heavily in that game at one stage, but they just did not give up. They fought all the way to the end. Without doubt, Kyla Charles is vital to them. She's averaging a double-double, 12 points, 10 rebounds across the first 2 games of this regular season. And also a big performance from Jovanovic last week. The vet coming in, stepping up in a big way, ended up with a 17-point display against Skio. Really helped them across the line. As for Avenida, well, they want to forget opening day because it was an absolute shocker for them. But what a way to bounce back. Last week, a 29-point win on their home floor in Salamanca over Lond. That too moves them to a 1-1 record. All 4 teams in that group, Skio, Lond, Avenida and DVTK, with 1 win, 1 loss records. Some big players coming out as well. Some youngsters stepping up for Avenida. None more so maybe than Sika Kone. 16 points, 13 rebounds against Lond. It was about a 12-minute double-double for her. She's really, again, growing into becoming a leader within that team from a very young age. Also, big shout out and a hat tip to Carter last week. A 16-point haul for her against Lond as well. She seemed unstoppable at times, able to create her own space, create her own shot, and was shooting a very, very high percentage. This is the one I'm covering on commentary this week, so if you tune into this one, you'll hear my dulcet tones on the mic commentating on this one. I'll go into my predictions later on. It's a difficult one to call, but I'll give you my predictions later in the episode. Second one to watch from me is Monterrey taking on Praha. This is going to be a really interesting one. I love this matchup. This is really, really good one to watch. Why? Because you've probably got the traditional powerhouse within Euroleague Women's of Praha. Stability, consistency, just always there at the top of the competition against this year's upstarts. This year's team, they're looking to create waves and start that process of becoming the perennial powerhouse. Umana Rea last week probably upset what most people thought was going to happen, picking up an 8-point win over Valencia. Valencia coming in with a huge amount of talent and experience. Umana Rea with a beautifully, almost perfectly balanced roster that they've got this year. Plenty of young players in there, the likes of Villa and Cuyer, but plenty of experience in there as well. Bacani and Pan, Santucci, so many good players coming through for Umana Rea. A lovely balance to it as well. 5 players averaging double digits for the Italian team. That makes them hard to guard. That makes it difficult from a scouting report perspective. Who are you going to try and lock out of the game? Who are you going to give open looks to maybe double onto some of their bigger threats? They're a tough matchup, and they'll be playing with a lot of confidence. They enter this game with a 2-0 record with no fear, really. No reason to have any fear heading into this game against Praha. Whereas pre-season, you'd probably look at this fixture and you just said, that's a tough game. That's a big early test for this roster and maybe one that they wouldn't be up to. However, we're not saying that now. But you flip to the other side, the road team, Praha. 14-point win over Győr last week. Certainly settled some nerves after a tough opening game day one. They're not at full strength yet. Brianna Jones hasn't quite made it to the floor yet in Euroleague Women's. Kozula, similar situation. So they're leaning on a reduced roster. That hurt them a couple of seasons ago in Praha, but they have more depth now. And some of their veteran players, their leaders, are stepping up. No more so than Conde last week. 26 points, 10 assists, 5 rebounds, 3 steals against Győr. Without shadow of a doubt, stepped up in a big way. I would have had her as my player of the week if it had been my selection to go through. You also have to love the introduction of Harrison. She's averaging over 15 points and 6 rebounds a game after stepping onto the floor for Praha this season. Again, another really difficult one. Steady, perennial powerhouse against the upstarts, the new kids on the block, as it were. Going to be a tough one to call. I'll give you my prediction later in today's episode. Final one to watch for me is Bourges against Brno. Both these teams enter on a 1-win, 1-loss record so far. Bourges coming in over on the back of a 35-point win over Olympiakos. Brno did a similar job over Olympiakos in their opening game of the season as well. They won by 31 in that one. Brno, however, lost to Mersin last week. 14-point loss for them. So both these teams have beaten Olympiakos, lost to Mersin by similar deficits. So you feel that this game is going to be absolutely limp and tuck. I think this game could be super, super close. You look at Bourges, they have a settled roster. They have players that have been there for a long time, that they're comfortable, particularly on their home floor. Certainly an electric atmosphere there. They also have a very settled balanced roster, so 4 players averaging over 10 points a game. The one thing I would say is it's maybe a slightly shallow rotation, an 8-player rotation right now. Any injuries or poor performances, a little dip in form for many of those key players, that could cause Bourges some issues, but at the moment they've not necessarily experienced that this season. As for Brno, well, Hamzova is clearly the highlight player, the surprise package that we've seen this year. Just 23 years of age, averaging over 19 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds a game in the regular season. That is unbelievable after 2 games. Our team's going to find her out now, though. She clearly maybe didn't register as high as she should have in scouting reports for game day 1 and game day 2. Now she is front and centre. She is in the middle of the sniper scopes for every team that they face. Will she still be able to create? Will she still be able to provide that impact? Alongside her, Kunain is going to be obviously the key in the front court, the American big, averaging a double-double, 14 points and 11 rebounds, as well as 4.5 assists as well. She's had a very strong start to the season, and it really is, for me, those two are the keys. One in the backcourt, one in the front court. And for Brno to continue to win games and to progress through this competition this year, those two are going to have to continue to produce those kind of numbers week after week after week. Will opposition teams be able to work them out and maybe lock them out of the game? From Kunain's perspective, is there more double team and help coming across when she goes to work? Are they going to deny ball to Hamzova? These are all things that potentially opposition coaches are going to start looking at. Again, another super close game, this one. I've got my thoughts on who's going to come away with the win, and I'll share you my predictions very, very shortly. Okay, to wrap up today's episode, I'm going to stir the pot. I'm going to give you my predictions for the 8 games in game week 3. First of all, Olympiakos against Mersin. This is a relatively straightforward one from my side. Olympiakos haven't shown us what we were hoping they would show us so far this season. Mersin looking strong, maybe not as strong as I thought they were going to be. Almost completely new roster though, so you expect that to take a few weeks to bed in. They're still turning over wins though with a perfect record. Mersin taking this one on the road for me. Another road win in the second game as well. I don't think Polkovica are going to be able to contain Fenerbahce. The depth and breadth of scoring option that Fenerbahce roster have is really difficult to contain. They can hurt you inside through the likes of Badian and Messerman. They can hurt you from the outside, the likes of Williams and Alamon. There's a ton of talent within that Fenerbahce roster, and I don't think Polkovica are going to stay with them again. this week. Again, game day 3, I think this is relatively easy. I've told my heart to shut up. I've told my head to take over when I start thinking about Lond. I think Skio looking good. Bump in the road last week against DVTK, started well but couldn't close the game out. There's certainly going to be a different prospect on their home floor as they showed in game day 1. I think they're going to be too much for Lond in this one. I think Skio will go in relatively confident against a Lond team that certainly struggled to find anything in game day 2. Next up, Villeneuve Dasc against Zaragoza. The home team, the French team, haven't looked strong. Obviously, last year's runners-up, massive changes in their roster. Had to recruit, had to use their budget smartly. Not sure they quite have the firepower to contend against a team like Zaragoza. Zaragoza, they've made changes as well this year. They're still trying to find some cohesion, but I think they're going to be too strong on the road for Villeneuve Dasc. For me, this probably is one, though, that the French team would be targeting as a first win of the season, a must-win game for them. Next up, final game on the Wednesday, Valencia against Győr. I've gone for the home team. Again, home court advantage is a big part of this, but I also think Valencia, just the talent in their roster. I had a wake-up call last week. I'm sure coach will have been talking to them. They'll have been talking to one another within that team, saying that that's not what they're here for. They're not here to lose those type of games. They'll have reset and they'll want to make a point, make a statement here in game day 3. And again, I don't think Győr quite have enough to cope with a highly motivated, focused and intense performance from Valencia on their home court. So Valencia to take that one. Now it starts getting difficult. These are the 3 that are up for offer. And again, if you agree or disagree with any of my predictions, please do drop a note in the comments or send me a message. I love to hear those thoughts. First up, we've got DVTK against Avenida. This was a super difficult one to select. DVTK on their home floor, really tough to bet against them. It really is. You feel guilty almost for betting against them because they are a different beast on their home floor than they are on their travels. However, I think Avenida had that wake up in week 1. Watching them play such a almost complete performance in game day 2, I think just gives them that advantage. I think they'll now have a little bit of momentum. They'll understand one another a little better than maybe they did in the opening week. So I've gone for Avenida on the road in this one. But again, this is going to be a close game. Second game up, home court advantage is the tipping point on this one. That's the only thing that I'm differentiating between these two. Two very different teams, as I've talked about earlier in the episode. Amana Rea, the young upstarts, the noisy neighbours kind of vibe from them against the steady away perennial Final Four team that is Praha. But I just think the home court will pay off here for Amana Rea. In front of their home fans, it will lift them in the tough points within that game. And I think that should get them to the win. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if you flip the script on this one and Praha come away with the win. But I'm sticking my neck on the line there, Amana Rea for the win against Praha. Final game of the week, Bourges against Brno. Again, I'm going home court for this one. It certainly has an impact, the game being in Bourges. I think Brno have the talent to cause an upset, but out of these 3 games on the Thursday, I think this is the one that I probably have most confidence to call. I think Bourges probably have a deeper, more talented roster, a roster that has more experience of Euroleague Women's, more experience of this level of basketball and the need to produce alongside your domestic competition, but also your Euroleague Women games in the midweek. I think Brno are still building, finding their feet, working out who they are, how they play. And I think their focus may be a little bit narrower than Bourges', which will enable the home team maybe to lock out a little bit more and limit Brno's offensive firepower. So I've closed out my final prediction of the week. Will Bourges will take that win on their home floor against Brno. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Mark on Comms. Again, I'm commentating on the DVTK versus Avenida game, so if you want to join me courtside, please do for that one on the either FIBA YouTube channel or on DAZN. Please do download the DAZN app and you'll be able to stream the Euroleague Women's games that go through there as well. So big week ahead of us. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please do follow me on social media, on any of the social media on channels. It's at Mark on Comms. My name's Mark Mills. Thank you for joining me and I'll catch up with you courtside soon.